Okay, everybody, part 6. We're already halfway done. Wow. Actually, I think you're more than halfway done already, because these first few parts were certainly very intense. This one will be a bit more intense than last episode. Bunch of stuff to do, a pause input, a pause menu, and yeah, a bunch of cool stuff that I have to teach you. So, let's get going. Alright, first off, we will do the input. So, if you remember back to part 2, we added this dash input together. I'd like you to try and add a pause input of your own. So, pause the video and try that out. Okay, in case you didn't make it, that's totally fine. I'll show you how it works. So, let's do ia_pause. Need a new pause input. Go back to this. We can collapse this. Add the pause input here. We will say escape. And we will also say P, just to test it more easily, because if we press escape while playing, then we stop playing. So we can't really test that, but we can test this, and that's the beauty of the system. Multiple keys. Alright, and now we can use it in our third-person character. So, scroll down past this. Pause. Where is it? Here. No. Pause. That's the right one. Okay. So, let's do a simple print. See if it works. Pause. Press P. Okay. Yeah. It fires. So, let's actually get the function that will set the game paused. So, set game paused. Whenever that is triggered, we basically want to check, is the game already paused? And if it is paused, then set the game to be unpaused and vice versa. So we can also set is game paused. So, and then we can say, we want to invert this value. So if the game is paused, if that is true, then we want to set this to false so that the game is no longer paused. And we can do this by saying not. Scroll up, not Boolean. And basically saying, when this value is true, it will be inverted to false, and vice versa. If it's false, then it will be inverted to true. That's the functionality we want. Okay, compile, and let's try that out. So, press P, and you can see, ooh, our game has paused. We can't move around anymore, nothing moves anymore. That's great. But if we press P again, you can see nothing happens. And that's because we actually need to do one more thing in the input. So, by default, inputs don't fire when the game is paused, and that usually makes sense. It prevents a bunch of nasty bugs from happening, but we obviously need the pause input to trigger when the game is paused. So, check that in the pause asset here. Otherwise, we can't unpause with a key, and that's no good. Alright, so let's go back, try this again, press P, okay, and yeah, it works somewhat, but if you press P, then the game might not always pause or unpause. Like if I press P, then right now, for instance, I pressed it and it just kept going, so there seems to be another issue here, and that's the beauty of programming. Or tragedy, depending on how you look at challenges. You fix one issue and another pops up. Alright, so what's the issue? Remember back to when I added a print. And we can check this again. So as you can see, hello was printed multiple times. Okay, that was a bit short. Yeah, you can see hello is printed a few times. And that's an issue because, this means this input action is triggered multiple times. And, so when it's triggered, it basically, inverts the pause state. So let's say it's triggered 3 times. It will check, is the game paused? By default, it's not, so it will set it to be paused. Then it is triggered again, and it will set the game to be unpaused, because it is paused now. And then it will check it again, and, the game isn't paused anymore, so it will pause it again. So it constantly switches between paused and unpaused. And, it could happen that it is triggered an even amount of times This means the game will just, you know, if it was unpaused before, it is still unpaused. Because, you know, twice just means it gets paused once and unpaused right afterwards. And multiples of 2, you know, the same. And if it's odd, then it will actually work as intended. But that's, you know, that's random. We don't want to leave it up to chance whether our game pauses or not, because it's such a essential mechanic. So, one thing we can actually do is use something called a trigger. Basically, we can have a bunch of modifiers for our input. So in the input mapping context, under pause and then triggers, we can have a bunch of triggers which basically determine whether or not our pause input actually fires. So let's go in here. We have a bunch of these and hover over pressed, and let's read what it says. Trigger fires once only when input exceeds the actuation threshold. Holding the input will not cause further triggers. Wow, this is exactly what we want. It's almost like I planned this. So, let's add this. We can now expand this, and this is the threshold. I think this is for analog inputs, I'm not sure. But, you know, setting it to 0.5 works for me. If we set it to 0, that means it's disabled, but anything else worked for me just fine. So, let's try this out. Pause. Okay, it works. And, you know, just press it a few times, a different, you know, different length of time, and you can see, you know, no matter how long or short we press the button, it reliably pauses and unpauses now. Okay, cool. So, this is working. Now we actually need a pause menu. So we can close this, head over to Platformer, and just like last episode, we're going to create a new widget blueprint. Same class, widget blueprint pause menu. That's what I choose to call it. Alright, save and open up. So, once again, same as last episode, we're gonna use the canvas panel so we can freely lay out our pause menu. I'm just gonna make it a bit bigger by dragging it out, but that's optional. It works at the default of 720p as well. So, now we actually need a pause menu. So ours will be very simple. It will just be 2 buttons in the center of the screen, one saying resume, which you can press to, you know, unpause the game, and one will be quit, in case you want to quit the game. So, we have buttons here, we could just drag them in both. We have 2 buttons now, and we could say, let's drag a text on top of that, either in here or in here. Both work. Do it for both, and then we can say, alright, resume, and the other will be quit. Okay, as you can see, these buttons aren't really aligned, and the text kinda clips through the resume button. So the way we can do this is click the button, and say size to content, same with the text, and we can do this with the quit as well, and now the text perfectly fits in our buttons. But now the buttons are of a different size, and that's not ideal. We could manually adjust the size here, but to fix this, we're actually going to use another widget from the panel section here, called a vertical box. And it aptly says, a vertical box widget is a layout panel allowing child widgets to be automatically laid out vertically. Okay, this just means if we put, you know, widgets in there, everything here is a widget. Then these will be, you know, arranged vertically, and that's what we want, because we want this resume button, and then below that we want the quit button to be. Okay, so drag this in here, and now it's a good point to talk about parent and child relationships. So if you remember, you know, we had this, we briefly talked about this when it came to components, like for instance the arrow component is a child of the capsule component, which is its parent. And, you know, the camera boom component is the parent of the follow camera, and so on. And this same concept applies to the widget blueprints. We can kind of visualize it like this. We have a parent, and the parent can have many children. Sometimes the amount of children is limited, but, you know, that's not important for now. Let's just say we have a parent, and that parent can have children. And these children can also be parents. And, you know, have children, and these children can also be parents and have children, and so on and so forth. You can make a very deeply nested tree. We're calling this trees because, you know, it's kind of like branches. It's an upside down tree, but that's actually something that's very common in computer science. So it's probably good if you understand, you know, what parents and children are and just how common this is. So I've already spoiled this, but in Unreal we've already seen this with components. But even outside of Unreal, there are lots of uses. The most obvious one would be a file system, you know, with a parent being a folder and a child being either a folder. You know, you can have folders inside of folders, but you can also have files, and these files cannot have children, so they would be children without parents, but, you know, would be children who cannot be parents. But, you know, you can have as deeply nested of a folder structure as you want to, and this is a very valid way to visualize these. So, parenting and children, important concept to understand. Alright, back to the engine. Okay, so now we need to actually make these buttons children of the vertical box. So we can really drag it in here. So let's drag this button and make sure it gets fully outlined, so it actually becomes a child. If you drag it like this, then it doesn't do anything, and this just reorders it. So if you collapse this, then, you know, it looks like it's a child, but it's not. So make sure it's fully, it's fully outlined. So now you can see if we collapse this, nothing else shows up. So these two buttons are now children, and you can see they have collapsed once again. Not very good, but same with the vertical box. We can also say size this to content, and now we have the buttons here. But I'm actually not going to do this. I'm going to say, you know, we kind of want this to be a bit wider so we can click the buttons more easily. So let's set a size, and we should center it because it's not really centered, and that kind of looks wrong. So if you think back to last episode, I introduced you to anchors, and you know, think about it. Where should we anchor this widget, you know, if we want it to be at the center of the screen? What would be a sensible anchor? So you can ignore these for now, but out of these 9, think about which one would make sense to have. Pause the video and see if you can figure it out. Alright, I kind of spoiled it already, I think, but it's the center of the screen. So, now the anchor is here. It kind of overlaps, but, you know, it's okay. We can still see what we're doing. So, it's still not centered, though, and if we set this to be 0, 0, then you can once again see the menu actually, you know, it's still not centered. It's now offset to the bottom right. Once again, think about last episode. There was a property in here which basically determined, you know, where the point, where like an imaginary point of the widget is, that is used for positioning. So, pause the video, think about, think about which property it is in here, and maybe you can even set the property to be, you know, to properly align the widget to the center. See if you can figure that out. Alright, it is the alignment property. So this was the little imaginary point was the pivot point, and currently the pivot is at the top left, which is the default for all widgets, and we want the pivot to be at the center. So when we say 0, 0, then, you know, no matter the size, the widget will always be laid out from the center, equally in all directions, horizontally as well as vertically. So I'll show you that this works. So we set this to 0.5 because that's right in the middle. If we set it to 1, then it would be on the right. But we want it to be set to 0.5, and this is now set horizontally for the x-axis, but we also want to set it for the y-axis, so it's truly in the center. And as you can see, you know, the distance here, that is equal, and that's also equal. So if we change the size now, then we won't have to adjust the position anymore. Very handy. And last but not least, I made some extra space down here because we kind of want to space these buttons out a bit so they're not right next to each other. So the way we can do this is expand this primitive section You have a spacer widget, which basically just, you know, as it says, it just provides padding between other widgets, so a little bit of space. And we can just drag this in here, and now we need to make sure that it's between those two. So, add this, you can see something has now been added in here. If we select it, it's between those. And we need to change the size. So for now, all that's enough is to set it to fill, so it properly fills out the rest of the vertical box. And now you can see the buttons are, you know, properly displaced. Wow. We have a nice little button column in the center of the screen. Alright. Now that our menu is basically complete, we just need to make it actually show up on the screen when the game is paused, allow it to receive input, and we also need to set the button functionalities. For now, let's just focus on making it appear / disappear on the screen. Like last episode, we're gonna do create widget. Yes, hold on. There's one more thing we need to do. So, we only want to create this pause widget when you know, we actually set the game to be paused. So, we basically need to check after that. We could do it before, but let's do after that. Let's check, is the game paused now? We have this branch, and now when the game is paused, we want to create the widget. The class is pause menu this time. We're gonna add it to the viewport, same deal as last episode. Alright, so we have that. And when it's false, we need to remove it. But now is the issue, you know, how do we get this widget? And here's another fun trick. Right click and promote to variable. This will create a new variable. This is our pause menu. And now connect it like that. And you can disconnect that, Alt left click and connect it like that. So it's clean. Alright, now what we can do, we have a variable which we can use to say remove from parent, which is the, you know, slightly strange function name for removing something from the screen. Let's test this out and see if it works. Pause. Ooh, very nice. And unpause, and it's gone. Very cool. Okay, so this is working, but our mouse cursor isn't showing up, and we would kind of like it to, so we can actually see, you know, what we're hovering here. And it doesn't appear that we're hovering anything, no matter how much we move the mouse around. So, let's fix that. For that, we need to get player controller, which is a new class that we haven't checked out before. Last episode we did get player character for this character, and the player controller is something else that we'll not really look at in this tutorial series, but it's quite a central class as well, and it provides us with a lot of functionality. In this case, it provides us with, if we search for mouse cursor, we can scroll down and set show mouse cursor. So we can say, alright, we want the mouse cursor to show up when, you know, when the game is paused. And copy this code down here, Control C, Control V. And when the pause menu is removed, we also want to no longer show the mouse cursor, so we don't, you know, we have no menu, we don't need it. So, pause, and you can see, oh nice, we have a mouse cursor. But the buttons aren't really hovered. We need to actually press once for the menu to get focus. And now you can see they change color when hovered. And we can click them. Nothing happens because the buttons don't have functionality yet. We'll add this in a moment. Now we can press, you know, P again. And the mouse cursor was there for a split second. I don't know if you saw it. But yeah, there's a bit more that we need to do. So we actually need to give this menu focus immediately, and that is done via another function called set input mode. So there are three input modes, basically game only, which is what we have by default, then UI only. This means this means only the game can respond to input. This means only the user interface can respond to input. So for instance, if you use, you know, keyboard keys to navigate like a menu, then it might make sense to set it to this, but for now we're gonna do something that allows both the game and the UI to receive input, because we also wanna be able to unpause the game with a key. So, you know, that also has to have some way to respond to the input, otherwise this wouldn't fire and we would only be able to unpause the game with the key in the UI. So, connect that up, double click to add a redirect to make it a bit nicer. So, and we can select the widget that we want to focus on, and since we have a reference to that, we can just say, plug it in here. So, the rest of these, they aren't very important. You can change some values, you can hover over them and basically see what they do. Some are kind of cryptic, but that's good for now. So, now when we pause, oh look, the UI actually has input immediately. And, okay, yeah, now because we don't set the input mode to go back, you can no longer actually use the mouse to move our camera. This is an effect of not setting the input mode back. So, to do that, we need to call set input mode game only. And, once again, add a little redirect. We don't need to worry about that. And now, when we press pause, okay? And now when we unpause, we can once again move the camera around with our mouse. Okay, that is good. Now we actually need to give these buttons some functionality, so we can also use the resume button to unpause the game. And we can use the quit button to, you know, quit the game. So, we're gonna do this in the graph. Let's delete those. Save often. And what we kind of need to do is we need to scroll down here, and we have some events. Remember events? Yeah, we can also say, you know, we can add an event for this button. And we're going to rename them by pressing F2. We're going to name this resume button, this quit button. So they're more aptly named. And now we can say OnClicked, and we can drag out from here and basically, you know, do whatever we want. For now, we're going to implement the quit button first, because that's easier. We have this quit button. There's only one node that we need to drag out from here, that we need to quit the game. So drag out from here and see if you can find the node which quits the game. It's named, you know, very well in my opinion. So pause the video and see if you can find it. Alright, yeah, the node is just called quit game. Very simple. Once again, nothing in here needs to be changed, but you can also say, you know, the application should actually be moved to the background. That's something interesting you can do. Or you can say only a specific player should quit. Not really important. Yeah, but this is kind of interesting. So, compile, save, boop. And now when we press quit, ooh, it quit. Okay, so the quit button is working. For the resume button, we need to do a bit more. So, we basically need, you know, this functionality where we say we remove the pause menu, we no longer show the mouse cursor, and we set the input mode to be game only. So, we could just copy this code. We actually don't need that because we can say, you know, copy it in here. And because we're in the pause menu, we can say, okay, it itself should be removed. So this would actually work if we put it in here. Okay, it's almost working. Oh right, we forgot to actually unpause. Okay, and yeah, that's an issue because I forgot something. I thought it worked, but it didn't. Because there's a bunch more functionality that we need. I'd like to introduce you to another concept before we add the code which unpauses the game in here. And this concept is called reuse. So what we're going to do is basically reuse the code that we've written to unpause the game, pause and unpause the game, and we're going to reuse it in both the character blueprint and the widget blueprint. So, why are we doing this? Well, first off, it saves us time, you know, we don't have to write the same code twice. And if we ever change the code, you know, the pause and unpause code, then it still works the same in both the widget blueprint and the character blueprint. because, you know, the changes are applied everywhere. This will become more clear in a moment. And this also prevents bugs. So, for instance, we changed the functionality, and if we didn't reuse the code, then we might forget to change the functionality in all places where this code is used. One more thing to say is that reuse is, you know, isn't the easiest concept to master. So figuring out, you know, how to make stuff reusable first and foremost isn't always easy. And where it makes sense to reuse stuff, that's also something that, that takes some time to get good with. So, I know this was a bit cryptic, but I hope the following section will make it more clear as to why this is very useful. So, click and drag to select all of this. We're gonna make this its own function so we can reuse it. Right-click on any of the nodes, really, and collapse to function. So, now we have a function here, and we're prompted to type something in. If you didn't, then you can press and click it and press F2. We're gonna call it toggle pause, because, you know, we're toggling the pause. Move that a bit up. As you can see, a new window has opened and all of our nodes are in here now. So, and instead of all of these nodes in place of all of these nodes in the blueprint graph, we have just this single pause node. Okay, if we compile and save, you can see it still functions the same as before. Nothing has changed about the functionality. Just now we can call this function from, you know, the pause menu and basically say, okay, you know, we want to do what's in here. And it will unpause a game, because whenever we call it from here, this means the game is paused, because the UI only shows up when the game is paused. So, let's do the same as we did last episode. Because our function is in the character, we need to get the character and cast it to the third-person character, because the function toggle pause isn't in the character class specifically, just in our subclass. So, once again, cast. And same with the coins variable that we can only access if we do the cast. We can only access this function when we do the cast as well. So, and that's all we need to do. So this is useful, as you can see, because not only it saves us some time, we don't have to write the same code twice, but now, if we were to change anything in here, this code in here would call the changed toggle pause function, and so would this code. So changes are applied everywhere. And this prevents bugs, because the pause functionality is, updated in both of these instances, here and here. Reuse is very useful when properly done. Okay, so let's test that out. Does it work? Nice. So try both the key and the button, and you will see that it now works properly. So we have a little pause menu, and we have succeeded in what we set out to do for this part. Okay, so once again, to recap, we did a bunch of stuff. We added a new input. We learned how to only fire this input once, so we don't pause and unpause multiple times a frame. We learned how to pause and unpause a game, first and foremost. We learned how to create and remove a menu based on certain conditions. We learned a bit more about layout and how we can add buttons. We learned about child-parent relationships of widgets and what widgets even are. I forgot to explain that last part. We learned how to give buttons functionality. We learned how to quit the game, how to resume the game again, and thanks to that we also learned what reuse is and why it's so useful. Next episode we're gonna add a level finish, and we're gonna learn how we can add more maps to our game and change between those maps, both in the editor and during the game. So, I hope you're looking forward to that, as always, and until then, see ya, and Creator out.